This next session covers two very important resources that are available through Vice Provost Tubman. Both Dr. Ralph Pollack, who will speak first, and then Luis Wides provide writing and editing services to faculty here at AU. Ralph has been doing it at AU for roughly 7 to 8 years. He's retired chemistry professor at UMBC, sorry, wrong school. And Luis has been doing it here at AU for a couple of years, I believe. But they both do great work, and they'll be each speaking a little bit about what services they do provide. But the takeaway I want to leave for the faculty and staff in the room that are submitting grants is that both of them are available for your use. If you're interested in engaging them and helping you write or edit your proposals, you should reach out to Anita Brown in John Tubman's office, and she will coordinate who can work with you. They have their own areas, I guess, of basic expertise, but they do cross over disciplines. And if John was here today, I know he would say that some of the time we don't use them enough as we should. And so they are available to the faculty and staff in this room that are regularly writing grants. So please use them. Please introduce yourselves to them, because that sort of resource, the writing and editing support, is not something that every university at this volume level does. And it's really a fantastic resource that both John and the provost greatly believe in. And so with all that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Ralph Pollack.
Good morning, everybody. There are a couple things I would like to do today. I have something on the order of 20 or 25 minutes, and I can spend a fair amount of that time telling you some of the things I do and some things I can do to help you all with your writing and and to support your grants. But I really don't want to spend that much time doing all of that, so I've got a few other thoughts on external funding that I wanted to present to you. But let me start off telling you what it is I do. I do basically two things. I give workshops or talks a couple times a year, usually on writing proposals and what you need to do to write proposals and how to write fundable proposals. And I'll give you just a short example of some of that stuff. The other stuff is what Jim mentioned, is I work individually with faculty members, and Louise also works individually with faculty members writing proposals. There are a couple of handouts. One of them is editorial assistance for proposal writing that describes what Louise and I do. And there's another one which comes from an online webpage that the provost, or not the provost, the vice president, John Tubman has written to suggest to you that it may be useful to work with us. All right, so I need to answer one question, or at least I think I need to answer one question. This has to do with credibility. Why would you come to me? Why would you think that I should be able to do something, and why should Louise be able to do something? I'll let Louise talk about her qualifications when he talks afterwards. My qualifications are basically pretty simple. I was at UMBC for 37 years. The day I walked on campus at UMBC, I had a grant. The day I left campus at UMBC, I had a grant, and every day in between, I had an externally funded grant. So I think I know something about writing proposals. All right, let me talk a little bit about some of the things you might think about in writing proposals. And what this is a very brief summary of some of the things that I'll be talking about in workshops that I'll be doing this year, probably one later this fall and one in the spring. All right, what do we need to know about obtaining funding? Well, it depends on a lot of different things. And one of the things it depends upon, obviously, is the quality of your idea and your research plan. It also has to be suitable for a particular funding agency, so you need to make sure that you're writing to the funding agency. Every funding agency has a particular mission. And what you want to do has to further that agency's mission. So for the most part, not in every case, but for the most part, the agencies are supporting research. They're not supporting you. They're not interested so much in your career. They're interested in the research you're doing. The investigative characteristics are very important. You must have credibility. You must be the right person to do the kind of research that you're proposing. Really important is significance. And what I like to say about significance is it's the who cares factor. Why would anybody care if this work gets done? And finally, the quality of the written proposal. And the quality of the written proposal is what Louise and I can help you with. And we're not talking about just editorial assistance, just saying the grammar doesn't fit here, or this is a different word choice. We're talking about how can you write the proposal to make everything up here stronger and clearer. Every proposal has a problem, it has a solution, it has some significance, the PI qualifications, the budget, the time frame. This is what's in every proposal. Whether you're writing for National Environment or National Institutes of Health or National Endowment for the Humanities, every proposal has to deal with these things. So how do you develop a research idea? A lot of you have research ideas, but they're not developed in the same sense that they would need to be developed for a proposal. Well, again, you have to identify an unmet need or an unsolved problem. It can't just be something you have to do. There has to be a reason for doing it. There has to be a problem out there that has to be solved, and it's got to be important to solve the problem. Obviously, you need to have a plan for solving the problem. It has to be a good one. You must be able to solve the problem in a reasonable time frame and a reasonable budget. Now, if you're reasonably perceptive, you would see that I've just said the same thing that I said previously. I just said it in different words. And these are the things you need to talk about, and you need to think about. A problem, an unsolved problem that's important, a plan for solving the problem, you must be the right person, reasonable time frame and reasonable budget. Now, what a reasonable time frame and reasonable budget? That depends on the agency. How much money will they give you and how long will they give it for you? But you need to make sure that your budget and your time frame match the scope of the work you're doing. And I say it needs to fit in with a long-term plan because agencies want to see that this is part of an overall program that you have, a research program, hopefully something that you've already done, an extension of that, and they want to see where you're going to go long-term, not just a small isolated project. All right, so what are some characteristics of successful proposals? Well, the writing has to be clear and concise. This is not, it's not necessary to write fantastic English. It is necessary to write clear, concise English. I don't want to say C-spot run is a model, but it's not a terrible model for this. It's better than having sentences that are 15 lines long with 14 clauses and the verb separated from the subject by 22 words. Successful proposals are usually original and creative. What makes your proposal stand out from other proposals? The approach obviously has to be feasible, you have to be qualified, you have to have the necessary facilities, and again, it has to be appropriate for the funding agency. All right, and there are some funding misconceptions that I've heard from talking to people over the last 8 or 10 years. A lot of people think that only established investigators get funded. Well, it's not true that only established investigators get funded. Now, do you have a better chance of getting funded if you've been at Harvard for 25 years and you've been doing good work and you've been funded for 25 years? Well, of course you do. But all of these people were new investigators at some time. And many agencies give extra points to new investigators. Many agencies are interested in funding younger people. There are some agencies or some programs that are solely for younger people or newer people. It's not true that only scientists get funded. The rate of funding for scientists is higher than the rate of funding for humanists, for instance, but it's not extraordinarily different. It might be 15 or 20% for most scientists, and it may be 10 or 15% for people in other areas. It's certainly not true that only people at major institutions get funded. There are programs that many agencies have that are for people at institutions that do not have PhD programs. In particular, there's an NIH program called the R15 program, which is only available to people who are doing science at institutions that have no PhD programs or very small PhD programs. This gives you an extraordinary opportunity to get funded at a fairly high rate without competing with the people at Harvard and Michigan and Berkeley and Illinois, et cetera. It's who you know. Well, it's not who you know that gets funded. In my experience as a reviewer, funders, people who are reviewing proposals do not fund you just because of who you are. But with that said, it's useful to know as many people as you can, because if you, as a reviewer, you pick up a proposal and you say, well, yeah, I recognize that person and I've seen his work, immediately your reviewer is in a better frame of mind than he would be otherwise, and a happy reviewer is a good reviewer. Need to do the work first. Some people tell me that's simply not true. You don't need to do the work. But in many cases, what you need to do is to have some preliminary results. And the purpose of these preliminary results is to show the reviewers that the work is feasible. All right, how can you increase your chances? Go to meetings. I can't stress this enough. Go to as many meetings as you can. Meet the people who are in the area. Find out what is hot in your area. And the way to find out is to go to meetings, because that kind of defines what's hot in your area. Talk to program directors at agencies. Meet people. Serve as a reviewer. If you get a chance to serve as a reviewer for any agency, jump at it. Try as hard as you can to get to serve as a reviewer. Talk to your department chair or talk to somebody on a review panel to recommend you to serve as a reviewer. The single best way to learn how to write a proposal is to review proposals on a panel. Is to look at a proposal, review it yourself, then hear what everybody else has to say about it. Use your colleagues. Make sure that you talk to your colleagues about your ideas. What are good ideas? What are poor ideas? What are their reactions to your ideas? Make funding a priority and don't give up. And I say that because if you are going to get funded, you are going to get rejected way more often than you get funded. I don't know anybody who has never been rejected for funding. Most of the time, when you do get funded, it will be on a renewal. I'm sorry, not a renewal, a revision. It'll be the second time or the third time you've written the same thing. And what does that mean? That doesn't mean don't spend any time on the first one. Because you want to write your proposal the best way you can, get feedback from the reviewers, then revise it to take into account that feedback, and that's going to be your best way of getting funded. All right. When you write, realize that proposal writing is different from most academic writing. It's got to be persuasive. You are a salesman out there. You have to sell what you're doing. It's difficult for academics to do sometimes because we tend to be a little self-effacing. We tend to think, I'm just going to do good work and everybody's going to know it. But you can't do that. You have to persuade the audience. You have to sell your work. And you have to get the reviewer involved. You need to get the reviewer on your side. All right, let's talk about fundable research for a minute. Research is obviously finding out something that hasn't been previously known, but the important thing here in red is fundable research is significant. And I'll keep coming back to that. Fundable research is significant. It passes the Who Cares test. Now, how do these things get reviewed? What happens to a proposal? Well, the process varies among different agencies. But generally, there are only a limited number of primary reviewers. And it could be a panel, it could be by mail. Sometimes the program staff, program directors are influential in the reviews, sometimes they're not. And that's a good reason to get to know program directors. You You want to find out what the process is for the agency that you're applying to. You want to know or determine reviewers if possible. Sometimes you actually can find out, particularly for NIH, you can get a pretty good idea of who the reviewers are going to be on your proposal. And, excuse me, many agencies let you suggest reviewers. If they do let you suggest reviewers, make sure you do it. All right, so what are reviewers looking for? I know Louise is going to talk a little bit about this also, and she's got a different way of looking at this. Excuse me, both ways are important. They're looking for the significance of the problem, probably more than anything else. Why should anyone care? Will your results positively impact people? Will the knowledge make a major contribution to your discipline? Again, you've got to get the reviewer excited about your proposal right at the very beginning. Right at the very beginning of the proposal, you need to state the significance. You can't go a page or two into the proposal talking about all of the background and everything. Reviewers are going to fall asleep. They're only reading your proposal because they have to. You've got to get them right at the very beginning. And then there's a list of things for the approach. Is the theory sound? The methods appropriate? Do you have any preliminary results? That's important. And is there a high likelihood that you will succeed? And have you recognized any potential pitfalls? Are there any alternative plans? Are your assumptions appropriate? Your analyses appropriate? Is there a reasonable evaluation plan? All right, so I'm giving you a handout for all of this. I don't expect everybody to grab everything and internalize it immediately. And that's why I have a handout. But when you write a proposal, think about all of these things in relation to your proposal and see whether you've dealt with them successfully. What about the qualifications of the applicant? You have background and expertise to do the work. Collaborators been identified. What's your prior publication record? How productive have you been? Do you have access to all the right facilities? Are there any important strengths of the institution, such as the HPC? And finally, creativity and innovation. Is the approach to the problem pedestrian, or is it an approach with special advantage? Are your methods new? Do you have any broader applicability of what you're doing? What makes your proposal stand out from others in the same area? What's going to make reviewers remember your proposal? If you get reviewers that go to a panel and somebody starts talking about your proposal and somebody else goes, oh yeah, that was the proposal with the dancing monkeys. Okay, you'll remember that. You'll probably remember I said dancing monkeys for the next week. But what's going to be in your proposal that's going to make sure that the reviewers remember your proposal? All right, so how do you maximize your chances of getting funded? Give yourself plenty of time. Plenty of time is more time than you think. I always started writing a proposal about 3 months early. That didn't mean necessarily writing it, but it was thinking about it. If you start a month before, you can do it, but it's a whole lot better if you give yourself longer, particularly for longer proposals. Use your colleagues. Make sure you're writing for the reviewers. Whenever you write anything, you're writing for an audience. The reviewers are your audience. Be visible in your community. Get sample proposals. Some agencies will give you sample proposals. Sometimes you can find sample proposals online. I have examples. I have sample proposals for several different agencies. You can get them from me. And don't give up, which I talked about previously. All right, common errors. Ambitious, proposal too ambitious. Literature isn't discussed critically. Critically is the key word there. No preliminary data makes it difficult for reviewers to see that your proposal will be able to be done, that the work can be accomplished. An unrealistic budget, I say insufficient scope, and many of you will look at it and go, well, you just said too ambitious, how does that fit in with insufficient scope? And how do you tell when something's insufficient scope or too ambitious? I can't tell you. You just pay attention to not doing too much and not doing too little, and you have to figure that out yourself. And lack of specificity is a really big one, using generalizations when you need to do something specific. All right, so how can Louise and I help you with this? Well, we can provide editorial help to help you improve organization, clarity, and general competitiveness. What I like to do is to work with people at the very earliest stages. That is, when you have an idea, about something, come and talk to me, and we can work with you there. Many times it will take several weeks just to talk about it, to get to what is the best way to sell it. There are often a lot of different ways of selling a proposal. It's important to spend some time thinking about what is the best way to sell a proposal. With that in mind, I'm available this afternoon and tomorrow morning. I think you're available also. Louise is also available for individual meetings with people. If you'd like to meet either with Louise or me, come up and see us now, or you can send me an email, and we'll set a time to just talk about the work you're doing and how you might think about selling this to a granting agency. All right, so I basically talked about all levels of proposal preparation advice. Yeah, that's pretty much the stuff I just said, isn't it? All right, so we will read these proposals, review them, edit them. I've gone, in many cases, through 5, 6, 8 different iterations of a proposal, just back and forth. Send me a proposal by email, I'll mark it up, discuss it, talk to you about it, send it back to you, rewrite it, keep going back and forth until either you and I are satisfied with it or you are sick of me. I will keep doing it. I will keep doing it as long as you think that it's worthwhile. The help in formulating appropriate strategies for planning and developing proposals, I think, is really important. That's the kind of thing which, when you're first starting writing proposals, is very difficult. What kind of strategy should you use? How should you go about selling it? How should you go about marketing it? And schedule an appointment to see either one of us. You can either get us individually or go through Anita Brown. And finally, again, I mentioned I'll be doing workshops in the fall and the spring and individual meetings either before and after the workshops that I do in the spring or today or tomorrow morning. That's my contact there. All right, so what I've done initially is just to give you a really, really broad outline of some of the ideas I have on writing proposals. If you think that those are valuable, you might be interested in some of the workshops that I do, which expand upon this and bring up a whole bunch of other topics. So this was about 20 minutes or so of the kind of thing that I will spend 2 hours on in a workshop. As I say, if you found this useful, come to some of those workshops. If you didn't find it useful, don't waste your time at the workshop.
See, I don't like PowerPoint, so I rarely use it, and I will be using just a couple of posters. I'd like to start out by asking how many of you have actually submitted a proposal for a grant? Okay, a few of you have. And among you who have already done this, have you ever received or seen the feedback from the foundation or the agency that you applied to? Okay, that is very good. That is very good. Well, I want to just say that the people who review your proposals, they do write down their comments. And often they are available. I won't say always, but they are often available if you ask. And they contain a tremendous resource for you in terms of what to do next time. And as Ralph said, there is usually a next time. That's sort of how it works. I have also talked to reviewers, kind of informally here and there. And based on what I've read and on my conversations, I would really like to talk about that today. So I'm going to focus on what I'm calling the reviewer feedback, because I think there is great guidance in all of that. Although reviewers express themselves in a lot of different ways, and obviously each organization has a slightly different focus, their recommendations, in my mind, come down to 4 main points. Or I guess I should say these are the 4 recommendations that I keep hearing from the reviewers. And the first one, I don't know whether you all can see it in the back, but it's also on that handout. The first one is to align the project with the funder's current themes or topics. The second is to clarify upfront, your purpose and objectives of whatever your project is. Third is to link your methodology to your objectives. And the last one is to write a clear proposal. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about these 4 ideas and sort of circling back and explaining them a little bit more. The first point, the concept of aligning your project with the funder's mission and themes. The funder's interests do not remain constant. They may have an overall overarching mission, but they will select certain topics and themes which can vary from period to period. They often will establish a series of topics or themes, and that will guide the proposals that they accept for maybe the next 2 or 3 years. And that changes. And they do this because they want to be involved in the here and now. They want to be involved with where academia is going and where policy is going. So this is the way they actually shape the future of the world. I don't know whether any of you have ever worked on Capitol Hill or known friends who have worked on the Hill, but people who do that, they are very excited about their jobs because they get to write legislation and they get to write policy, and they feel like they are making the world a better place. Well, foundations do the same thing. You don't know their names, but that's what they're doing. And when they establish the themes for a coming year, that's in effect what they are doing to shape society. Well, this has great implications for you all as applicants, those of you here who are applicants. The first thing is that you need to be sure that your project is aligned with these themes. And there is a great database that makes this an easy task. There is, and in fact, there isn't just one, but there's one that I'm certainly familiar with, which is here in Washington on K Street. It's called the Foundation Center. And their database is available through your library here at American University. And not only that, you can access the database from your home computer or from your office. And this will enable you to do all kinds of research to figure out the right match between your project and the foundation. So that's the first sort of implication. The second one is that you should be prepared to modify your proposal, even your project, in order to suit the themes that the foundation is putting forward. Now, when I say this, my guess is that your natural instinct is to balk. You know, why should I compromise something that I have been working on for months or even years? I've worked with faculty here at AU who are working on books, and it represents, you know, probably some combination of their PhD thesis and other research and lectures they've given. You know, they're not about to suddenly change the focus of their book. But what I'm suggesting is that given the huge competition there is out there, and the shrinking amount of funds, because Congress has cut back, and that then trickles down to everyone else, and the foundations are cutting back, you might want to consider this as an approach. I'm thinking of one of the projects that I worked on over the last year. This was here at American University. And it was actually two professors from two different parts of the university who were very interested in doing a film on a rather controversial subject. And for purposes of privacy, I won't say more than that. But they clearly had a very strong point of view on this subject. And they had already been informed they had gotten feedback, and they had been informed that there was no way they'd ever get money for that, because they were going from a national endowment for humanities money, which of course starts with Congress, so you're dealing with political issues. Well, together we worked and talked, and eventually they transformed their project into kind of a historical description of what had happened in this general area. So they weren't expressing a particular point of view, but they had a chance to include that point of view as part of a much broader historical examination. Now you're of course wondering, well, did they get the money? And the answer is, I don't know. I think it's still in process, because just as Ralph said, you often have to submit more, I would say maybe more than once, and maybe 2 or 3 times. So that's the concept to think about, maybe even modifying your approach. Now, on this second point, clarifying up front. Most of the proposals that I have read, there's no question that the applicant makes clear his objectives, his overall goal. But usually, or often, the tendency is to start out telling a story and to give all the background. And the background is, is part, as Ralph said, to get the interest of the reader. There's this problem out there, and this happened, and that happened, and maybe some army invaded a country, and what are we going to do about this? And then on page 3, they come up with their solution. Well, I want to tell you, that seems very logical. That's sort of a way that we all think. Let me tell you about a problem, and then I'm going to tell you how I'm going to fix this problem or solve it with my project. But the problem is that the reviewer may not want to slog through 3 pages of history and philosophy and different points of view, and they get kind of tired. And you have to keep thinking all the time that you are writing this proposal for a reviewer. This is not the same public that's going to read your final research project or your final book. You are writing for one person who has a stack of proposals, maybe a foot high, and they've got a lot of work and they're trying to get through it. And if they start out and have 3 pages of, single text, no headings, and finally on page 3, they find out what the purpose of this whole project is and what the objectives are, that's later than it should be. I recommend trying to get it on page 1. And if you can't do it on page 1, certainly page 2, but get it up front. So the next one is linking your methodology to your objectives. What one reviewer said on a project was, it was not enough to simply list all the objectives on one page and all the methodology on another page. That reviewer said, we want to see how your methodology is actually going to reach your objectives. And I will tell you that that is tough. That is not such an easy thing to do. And in that context, I would like to give a plug to an earlier presentation we had this morning from Eric. I hope most of you were here. Eric Charles, who is from the Center for Teaching, Research, and Learning. And Eric mentioned, he had a long thing about all the things that his organization here at AU does. But one of the things that he talked about was determining the compatibility between data collection methods and analysis. And I spoke to him after his talk, and this is exactly the kind of thing that, to think in advance, how is the methodology of whatever I'm doing going to really link up to those objectives? Or another way of saying it, how it will link up with the analysis, the really mental, intellectual part. And you've got to put them together, and you can't just think of them as being part of a separate box. And what Eric said to us this morning is, I'm here to help you. So take advantage of that. I mean, he sounds like, I don't know him personally, but he sounded like a very smart and very caring guy. And I think that would be something that would be of help to you. So the last thing is writing a clear proposal. Now, my guess is that all of you have heard that many, many times, and you know that you're supposed to write a clear proposal. I want to share with you a comment that one of the reviewers said to me. He said, 1 out of every 10 proposals I review is clear, is well written. And then he added, and I love reading that proposal because it's easy. And as Ralph said a few minutes ago, a happy reviewer is going to be on your side. So you want to please your reviewer. And if you can write something that's clear and make it easy for him or her to go through your proposal, you are already getting on the positive side of that guy. So I will just add one other thing. Ralph was talking earlier about the fact that you can be a new person and you will get funding for the first time. But the person who was, the reviewer was talking to me about the whole question of clarity said, you know, it's no guarantee. A clear proposal will not automatically get the grant, but it sure is a head start. And he said this is particularly important for first-timers. If you don't have any track record on research yet, it's a little bit, Avis has to try harder. And one way of trying harder is making sure that that written proposal is very well written in exactly the ways that Ralph just described. So, in closing, I want to introduce another idea. This is also echoing what Ralph said. It is really a good idea for you to develop a relationship with the foundation that you're applying for money for. It offers an opportunity for the funding organization, and that means that they want you to contact them. They like it if you reach out to them, and you can do that before or after you have submitted a proposal. When I say after, I mean if you have been rejected. If you are in a situation, you've gotten the feedback, and no, we're not going to give you the money, that's the time for you to pick up the phone or go to your computer and try to see them. And go in and talk about it. They will tell you why. They will give you some feedback as to what you need to do. Now, do they do this because they are so nice? No. They do it because this is their chance to shape the world. If they can get you to modify your proposal in a way that meets their needs, their mission, they are very excited. So they want to nurture you. They actually want to kind of befriend you and get you to listen to them. And then if you resubmit that proposal and it reflects the ideas that they've suggested, you've got a much better chance. But all of this is also a fabulous opportunity for you. And that's the other point that I wanted to mention. And I say that because first of all, it's an opportunity to find out what do they really want with regard to you. They're already somewhat familiar with you, or you go in, you talk. If you've never had the proposal submitted, you might go and talk and say, look, I've got this idea. Is this the kind of thing that you guys fund? And they might say, it's really clever, great idea, but we don't do this. But they might even make suggestions about another organization that does. So all of that is a very positive thing. But there's one other thing, and that is that when you have that personal contact, you also have a chance to demonstrate who you are. The very fact that you've contacted them means you're someone who takes initiative. It means you're really committed to this project. You're making this effort. You're getting on the phone or whatever. That's impressive. And finally, it also suggests that you are someone who perseveres, that this is really an indication of perseverance. And this gets back also to something that Ralph mentioned. Yes, they're evaluating your proposal, but they want to make sure that you are the person who can really carry it out. And one way is just to kind of evaluate who you are as a person. So when you have that contact, you're giving them that opportunity. Now, one last thing. This is what I do. I try to help you carry out these recommendations. It will obviously vary from person to person. You all have different skills. Some of you are, let's say, you're fabulous at aligning your project. You don't need much help there. So we won't even talk about that very much. But I try to respond to what you need and also what you say you need. If you say, I don't want to talk about any of this, all I want you to do is just help me write a clear proposal. Okay, 2 more minutes. So that's what I'll do. It's what I've been doing over the last almost 2 years. I've worked with more than a dozen faculty from arts and letters, arts and sciences, from COGOD, from the law school, from SIS. I mean, it's been all over. And this is basically what I've learned and what I hope to continue to do. So, are there any questions that any of you have? I am going to write up here right now the link to the Foundation Center, so you can at least go and look at it online and get a feel for what kinds of resources they offer you. And as I say, you can access them here through American University. Yes?
Hi, Jordan Tama, I'm in SIS, and question for either of you. Ralph, you talked particularly about this, the idea of a solution being in the proposal. And my research is on U.S. foreign policy, and usually what I think of as that I'm trying to achieve in my research is improving understanding of something, to help, adding to understanding of some aspect of U.S. foreign policy making. But I'm not sure what the solution, what could be a solution in that sense. So for instance, if I'm looking at an issue like trying to understand patterns of partisanship and bipartisanship in U.S. foreign policy, this could have implications about improving understanding of the conditions that facilitate foreign policy bipartisanship. Would that be a solution, or is there something else that needs to be part of a proposal that is characterized as a solution? Yeah.
Well, what's the problem first?
So
What's the need for your work? Isn't that
The-
the problem I have with need?
Yeah, so one need for the work would be that we don't have a good understanding of why certain policy issues break down more on partisan lines or attract more bipartisan support in Congress. And my research is trying to improve our understanding of the conditions or circumstances that facilitate or allow for more bipartisanship in foreign policy. It's something that the existing literature doesn't explain well. So I'm trying to illuminate something that we don't currently understand well. But I'm not sure if that fits as what you're thinking of as a problem.
Obviously, there's a need for it,
Yeah.
because we've got a Congress that doesn't talk to each other across the aisles. So your solution is to provide information that will help them communicate. So I would think about it as the need is lack of, or the need or problem is lack of communication, and the solution is information that will enhance this communication. It doesn't. I mean, I talk about problems and solutions and things kind of from a scientific perspective where it's really straightforward. But the same thing applies in much less straightforward areas. It's not necessarily a hypothesis and a solution. I think that would work fine. Want to comment on that? I do want to just say one thing is that Louise noted, and I noted also, that we said very much the same thing in different ways. We did not talk to each other about this before we presented it. We independently came to what are basically the same conclusions. And I would suggest to you maybe one of us is right. One other comment that I want to make about two things that Louise said, which are extremely important. The question of having your objective right at the very beginning, absolutely. There's a fellow at the National Science Foundation, program director, who has a quote. He says, your objective should be in the very first sentence of the very first paragraph, followed by two. For every inch further down the page, your objective is, your chances of getting funded decrease by 1%.
I would just add one thing about that, because I thought a lot about this when I read these proposals. I think this may actually be a cultural question, which is to say that, and it may be that no one here this is true for, but people coming from, let's say, a non-Western culture, it may seem very odd and different to start out and say, this is what we're going to do, and then kind of elaborate on it. That it's part of their culture to first talk about the background and the problem and so forth and so on, and eventually get to, sort of the punchline. I think back of grade school, high school even, when we were all taught to write a paragraph of the topic sentence. And you had to make a great statement, and then you had to provide, the ideas that supported either illustrations or arguments and whatever. So that, to a large extent, those of us who came through the American school system were kind of primed to think this way. First you make your statement, and then you go back and kind of support it. But it may be somewhat unique, I won't say to the United States, I think Western Europe.
I think it's a Western Eastern
I think,
thought thing.
yeah. So I think that for those faculty who have come from a very different kind of approach, this may feel awkward and may be a bit of a stretch, but it's all the more reason that I think that Ralph and I can be helpful, because the people who are reviewing these projects are from a Western culture. I mean, that's they're the ones who are giving out the money. And so you as faculty, have to make sure that you're writing for them.
I agree 100%. I found the same thing. And the other comment I wanted to say was Louise's discussion about making your project fit what the agencies want, whether funding, making your project fit what the funding agencies want. In many cases, you do not have to actually change what you want to do. You just have to change the way you market it, the way you sell it. And we can help you with that. There are a lot of different ways of selling different things. And it's just a question of stress. And sometimes it's difficult to see it when it's your own project. It can be a lot easier sometimes to see it when it's somebody else's. Any other questions?